Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the life you've been living is not yours. It's a borrowed script, written by someone else, society, your parents, your fears. You've been following it dutifully, step by step, afraid to stray from the lines. But now, as you stand at the edge of a decision, one that could change everything, you freeze. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and a voice whispers in your ear, "What if you fail?" This is not just a moment of hesitation. It's a moment of reckoning, a moment where the weight of all the paths you didn't take, the risks you didn't dare, and the dreams you buried comes crashing down. And yet, you don't move. You stay stuck, paralyzed by the fear of failure. But here's the unsettling paradox. The fear of failure doesn't just keep you from failing, it keeps you from living. It's a silent thief, stealing your potential, your creativity, your joy. It convinces you that staying small is safer than risking the fall. And so you remain in the cage of your own making, staring at the open door but never stepping through. Why? Why does the mere possibility of failure hold such power over us? Why do we cling to the familiar, even when it suffocates us? And why, when we know deep down that failure is a natural part of growth, do we still let it dictate our lives? Consider this. Every great achievement in human history was born from the ashes of failure. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter found a home. Even the most successful among us have faced setbacks, yet we idolize their triumphs and ignore their struggles. We celebrate the destination but erase the journey. But what if the journey, the messy, uncertain, failure-filled journey, is the point? What if failure is not the opposite of success but its necessary companion? And what if the fear of failure is not a protective instinct but a self-imposed prison? Think about the last time you wanted to try something new, a career change, a creative project, a relationship. Did you go for it, or did you hesitate? If you hesitated, what stopped you? Was it a rational assessment of the risks, or was it something deeper, something darker? A voice that said, "You're not good enough. You'll embarrass yourself. You'll regret it." That voice is not your friend. It's not even your own. It's the echo of centuries of societal conditioning, of cultural narratives that equate failure with shame, weakness, and worthlessness. It's the voice of a world that values perfection over progress, certainty over curiosity, and conformity over courage. But here's the question that haunts. What if the fear of failure is not just a fear of falling, but a fear of flying? What if the real danger is not in failing, but in never trying at all? As you sit with these questions, feel the tension they create. Feel the weight of the life you're living versus the life you could be living. Feel the pull between safety and freedom, between comfort and growth. This is the great question at the heart of the human experience. Will you let fear keep you stuck, or will you dare to step into the unknown? The answer is not simple. It's not a matter of willpower or positive thinking. It's a matter of understanding, of peeling back the layers of fear to uncover its roots. And those roots run deep, tangled in the soil of psychology, philosophy, and the very fabric of our existence. So let's begin there. Let's dig into the hidden problem, the psychological and philosophical forces that keep us trapped in the fear of failure. Because only by understanding the cage can we find the key to freedom. But be warned, what you're about to discover may unsettle you. It may challenge your beliefs, your identity, even your sense of reality. And yet, it's only by facing these truths that you can begin to break free. Are you ready to take the first step? To understand why the fear of failure holds such power over us, we must first confront a truth that is both uncomfortable and liberating. The fear of failure is not about failure itself. It's about what failure represents. It's about the stories we attach to it, the meanings we assign to it, and the identities we fear losing because of it. At its core, the fear of failure is a fear of annihilation, not of the body, but of the self. It's the terror of being exposed as inadequate, unworthy, or unlovable. It's the dread of losing the approval of others, the security of the familiar, or the illusion of control. And beneath all of this lies the deepest fear of all, the fear of confronting our own insignificance in the grand scheme of existence. This is where psychology and philosophy intersect, offering us a lens through which to examine the roots of this fear. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, spoke of the shadow, the hidden, repressed parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. The fear of failure, in many ways, is a shadow phenomenon. It arises from our refusal to confront the possibility that we are not as capable, as competent, or as invincible as we'd like to believe. Jung argued that until we integrate our shadow, until we face our fears, our flaws, and our limitations, we remain trapped in a cycle of self-deception. We project our insecurities onto the world, blaming external circumstances for our internal struggles. We create elaborate defense mechanisms to protect our fragile egos, from perfectionism to procrastination to outright avoidance. But these defenses come at a cost. They keep us small, stagnant, and disconnected from our true potential. They prevent us from taking risks, from embracing vulnerability, and from fully engaging with life. And in doing so, they perpetuate the very fear they were designed to avoid. Philosophers have long grappled with the human tendency to avoid discomfort and cling to certainty. Friedrich Nietzsche, the existential thinker, famously declared, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." Yet he also recognized that most of us are unwilling to endure the suffering required for growth. We prefer the safety of the herd to the solitude of the pathfinder. We choose the comfort of conformity over the chaos of creation. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power, the drive to assert oneself and overcome obstacles, sheds light on why the fear of failure is so paralyzing. When we fear failure, we are essentially rejecting our will to power. We are surrendering to the forces of mediocrity, allowing fear to dictate our actions rather than our own inner strength. Arthur Schopenhauer, another philosopher who delved into the nature of human suffering, saw fear as a manifestation of the will to live, the primal force that drives all beings to survive and thrive. But Schopenhauer also warned that this will can become a prison if we allow it to dominate our lives. When we prioritize survival over growth, we become slaves to our fears, trapped in a cycle of avoidance and regret. Modern psychology echoes these insights, revealing how the fear of failure is often rooted in early experiences of shame, rejection, or inadequacy. For many of us, failure was not just a setback, but a source of profound humiliation. Perhaps we were ridiculed for a mistake, punished for a poor grade, or compared unfavorably to a sibling. Over time, these experiences became internalized, shaping our beliefs about ourselves and our worth. Cognitive biases further entrench these beliefs. The negativity bias, for example, causes us to focus on potential threats rather than opportunities. The spotlight effect makes us overestimate how much others notice and judge our failures. And the confirmation bias leads us to seek evidence that supports our fears while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. Societal forces also play a significant role. We live in a culture that glorifies success and stigmatizes failure. From a young age, we are taught that our value is tied to our achievements, our grades, our job titles, our social status. We are conditioned to believe that failure is not just a setback, but a moral failing, a sign of weakness or incompetence. This cultural conditioning is reinforced by the media, which celebrates overnight successes and airbrushes out the struggles that precede them. It's reinforced by our education systems, which prioritize standardized testing over creative exploration. And it's reinforced by our workplaces, which reward conformity and punish risk-taking. But here's the twist. The fear of failure is not just a personal or cultural issue. It's a deeply human one. It's a reflection of our existential dilemma, the tension between our desire for meaning and our awareness of our own mortality. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, argued that the search for meaning is the primary drive of human life. Yet this search is fraught with uncertainty. We fear failure because we fear that our efforts will be meaningless, that our lives will amount to nothing. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, took this idea further, asserting that we are condemned to be free. We have the freedom to choose our actions, but with that freedom comes the burden of responsibility. The fear of failure, in this sense, is a fear of our own freedom. It's a reluctance to take responsibility for our choices and their consequences. As we peel back these layers, the fear of failure begins to reveal itself as something far more complex than a simple aversion to risk. It's a multifaceted phenomenon, shaped by our psychology, our philosophy, and our culture. It's a reflection of our deepest fears and our highest aspirations. and it's a barrier that stands between us and the lives we are capable of living. But understanding the roots of the problem is only the first step. To truly break free, we must confront the consequences of this fear, the ways it silently shapes our lives and limits our potential. And that is where we must turn next. Because the fear of failure is not just a personal struggle, it's a societal one. It's a force that shapes our relationships, our careers, and our collective future. And until we confront it, we will remain trapped in a cycle of stagnation and regret. So, let's dive deeper. Let's explore the unseen consequences of the fear of failure and the urgency of escaping its grip. Imagine a world where every great idea was left unspoken, every bold dream abandoned, every act of courage stifled before it could take flight. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It is the world we live in, shaped by the silent, pervasive force of the fear of failure. It is a world where potential is buried, creativity is stifled, and progress is halted, not by external barriers, but by the invisible chains we place on ourselves. The fear of failure does not announce itself with fanfare. It operates in the shadows, whispering doubts, sowing hesitation, and eroding confidence. Its consequences are subtle but profound, shaping not only individual lives, but the collective trajectory of humanity. On a personal level, the fear of failure manifests as a relentless inner critic, a voice that questions every decision and magnifies every mistake. It convinces us that playing it safe is wiser than taking risks, that fitting in is better than standing out, that avoiding failure is more important than pursuing success. Over time, this voice becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, limiting our potential and trapping us in a cycle of mediocrity. Consider the artist who never shares their work, fearing it will be judged, the entrepreneur who abandons their startup at the first sign of difficulty, the student who chooses a safe career path over their true passion. These are not just individual tragedies, they are collective losses. Every unrealized idea, every abandoned dream is a missed opportunity for innovation, connection, and growth. But the consequences of the fear of failure extend far beyond individual lives. They shape the very fabric of society, perpetuating systems of conformity, inequality, and stagnation. In the workplace, for example, the fear of failure stifles creativity and innovation. Employees who fear making mistakes are less likely to propose new ideas, challenge the status quo, or take initiative. This creates a culture of compliance, where conformity is rewarded and risk-taking is punished. In education, the fear of failure prioritizes grades over learning, memorization over curiosity, and standardized testing over critical thinking. Students are taught to fear mistakes rather than embrace them as opportunities for growth. This not only limits their potential, but also perpetuates a system that values performance over passion, achievement over authenticity. Even in relationships, the fear of failure can have devastating consequences. It prevents us from being vulnerable, from expressing our true feelings, from taking the risks necessary for deep connection. It keeps us trapped in superficial interactions, afraid to reveal our flaws and imperfections. Over time, this erodes trust, intimacy, and the very foundation of meaningful relationships. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of the fear of failure is its impact on our sense of self. When we allow fear to dictate our actions, we betray our own values, desires, and aspirations. We become strangers to ourselves, living lives that feel hollow and unfulfilled. This disconnect between who we are and who we could be is the source of much of the anxiety, depression, and existential despair that plague modern society. Cognitive biases and neurological mechanisms further entrench these consequences. The loss aversion bias, for example, causes us to prioritize avoiding losses over achieving gains. This makes the fear of failure feel more urgent and compelling than the desire for success. The status quo bias makes us prefer familiar routines over uncertain possibilities, even when those routines are unsatisfying or harmful. Neurologically, the fear of failure activates the brain's threat response, releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This creates a feedback loop, where the fear of failure triggers stress, and stress reinforces the fear of failure. Over time, this can lead to chronic anxiety, burnout, and even physical health problems. Cultural conditioning amplifies these effects, perpetuating narratives that equate failure with shame, weakness, and worthlessness. From a young age, we are taught to avoid failure at all costs, to seek external validation, and to measure our worth by our achievements. This creates a society that values perfection over progress, certainty over curiosity, and conformity over courage. But here's the paradox. The fear of failure is not just a barrier to success, it is a barrier to meaning. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, argued that meaning is found not in avoiding suffering, but in embracing it as a necessary part of the human experience. When we fear failure, we reject this truth. We prioritize comfort over growth, safety over purpose, and in doing so, we rob ourselves of the very thing that makes life worth living. The consequences of the fear of failure are not just personal or societal, they are existential. They shape how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, and how we engage with the world. They determine whether we live lives of courage and creativity or lives of fear and regret. But there is hope. The fear of failure is not an immutable law of nature. It is a mindset, a habit, a story we tell ourselves. And like any story, it can be rewritten. To do this, we must first confront the unseen consequences of the fear of failure. We must recognize how it shapes our lives and limits our potential. We must feel the weight of the opportunities lost, the dreams abandoned, the lives unlived. Only then can we begin to imagine a different way of being, a way defined not by fear, but by courage, not by avoidance, but by action, not by stagnation, but by growth. This is not an easy task. It requires us to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs, to face uncomfortable truths, and to embrace uncertainty. But it is also a profoundly liberating one, because when we confront the fear of failure, we reclaim our power, we rediscover our potential, and we open ourselves to the possibility of a life that is not just safe, but truly alive. So, let us take the next step. Let us explore how to break free from the fear of failure, how to rebel against the forces that keep us stuck, and reclaim our right to live boldly, authentically, and fully. Because the fear of failure is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. And that story is yours to write. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around you, the ground far below. You feel the pull of gravity, the weight of your fear, the voice in your head screaming, "Don't jump." But then something shifts. You realize that the cliff is not a threat, it's an opportunity. The fall is not the end, it's the beginning. And the fear that once paralyzed you becomes the fuel that propels you forward. This is the moment of rebellion. The moment when you decide to break free from the fear of failure and reclaim your life. It's not an easy moment. It's not a comfortable moment, but it is a transformative one. Breaking free from the fear of failure requires a radical shift in perspective. It requires you to challenge everything you thought you knew about failure, success, and yourself. It requires you to embrace uncertainty, to take risks, and to redefine what it means to live a meaningful life. The first step in this rebellion is to reframe failure. Instead of seeing it as a threat, see it as a teacher. Every failure is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become stronger and wiser. Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb, famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This mindset, this willingness to embrace failure as part of the process, is the foundation of resilience and innovation. But reframing failure is not enough. You must also confront the stories you tell yourself about failure. These stories, that failure means you're not good enough, that it will lead to rejection or humiliation, are not facts. They are interpretations, shaped by your fears and insecurities. By questioning these stories, you can begin to dismantle their power over you. One powerful way to do this is through cognitive restructuring, a technique used in cognitive behavioral therapy. This involves identifying negative thought patterns, challenging their validity, and replacing them with more empowering beliefs. For example, instead of thinking, "If I fail, I'll be a failure," you might reframe it as, "If I fail, I'll learn something valuable and become stronger." Another key to breaking free from the fear of failure is to embrace vulnerability. Brené Brown, a researcher and author who has studied vulnerability extensively, argues that vulnerability is not a weakness but a strength. It's the courage to show up, to be seen, to take risks, even when there are no guarantees. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open yourself to connection, creativity, and growth. But vulnerability requires self-compassion. You must learn to treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a friend. Instead of berating yourself for your mistakes, acknowledge them with empathy and curiosity. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? This shift from self-criticism to self-compassion is a powerful act of rebellion against the fear of failure. Taking action is another crucial step. The fear of failure thrives in the realm of the hypothetical, where every risk feels catastrophic and every possibility feels uncertain. But when you take action, when you step into the arena and face your fears, you realize that failure is not as terrifying as you imagined. And even if you do fail, you discover that you are stronger and more resilient than you thought. This is where the concept of exposure therapy comes into play. By gradually exposing yourself to the things you fear, whether it's public speaking, starting a new project, or asking for help, you can desensitize yourself to the fear of failure. Over time, what once seemed insurmountable becomes manageable, even empowering. Historical examples of those who broke free from the fear of failure can also inspire and guide you. Consider J.K. Rowling, who was rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter found a home. Or Steve Jobs, who was fired from Apple, the company he co-founded, only to return years later and lead it to unprecedented success. These stories remind us that failure is not the end, it's a stepping stone on the path to greatness. But rebellion is not just an individual act, it's also a collective one. By creating communities that celebrate risk-taking, resilience, and growth, we can challenge the cultural narratives that equate failure with shame. We can build systems, in education, in the workplace, and society, that prioritize learning over performance, curiosity over conformity, and courage over comfort. This rebellion is not easy. It requires courage, persistence, and a willingness to face discomfort. But it is also profoundly liberating. When you break free from the fear of failure, you reclaim your power, you rediscover your potential, and you open yourself to a life that is not just safe, but truly alive. So take the leap, reframe failure, embrace vulnerability, take action, and join the rebellion against the fear of failure. Because the fear of failure is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new one, and that story is yours to write. Now, let's turn to the ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization that will redefine how you see failure, success, and yourself. Here it is, the revelation that changes everything. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the essence of it. This is not a platitude. It is not a motivational slogan. It is a profound truth, one that redefines how we see ourselves, our lives, and the world around us. Failure is not a deviation from the path to success. It is the path. It is the raw material from which greatness is forged, the fire that tempers resilience, and the mirror that reveals our deepest truths. Consider this. Every time you fail, you are not falling short of your potential. You are uncovering it. Failure strips away the illusions of perfection, the masks of invincibility, and the pretenses of control. It forces you to confront your limitations, your fears, and your humanity. And in doing so, it reveals your strength, your creativity, and your capacity for growth. This is why failure is so terrifying. It is not just a threat to your ego, it is a confrontation with your true self. It asks you to let go of who you think you should be and embrace who you are. It demands that you stop chasing external validation and start cultivating inner worth. And it challenges you to redefine success, not as the absence of failure, but as the courage to keep going in spite of it. The ultimate truth about failure is this. It is not something to be avoided. It is something to be embraced. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a testament to your courage. It is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. When you internalize this truth, everything changes. The fear of failure no longer holds you back. It propels you forward. The voice that once whispered, "What if you fail?" now asks, "What if you succeed?" The risks that once seemed insurmountable now feel like opportunities. And the life that once felt small and stagnant now feels expansive and alive. This is the power of the ultimate truth. It is not just a shift in perspective, it is a shift in being. It is a reclamation of your power, your potential, and your humanity. It is a declaration that you are not defined by your failures, you are defined by your willingness to rise from them. So, what does this mean for you? It means that every time you fail, you have a choice. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. You can let it break you, or you can let it make you. You can let it keep you stuck, or you can let it set you free. The choice is yours. And when you choose to embrace failure, to see it not as a threat but as a teacher, not as an end but as a beginning, you step into a new way of being. You become someone who is not afraid to take risks, to dream big, to live boldly. You become someone who is not defined by fear but by courage, not by avoidance but by action, not by stagnation but by growth. This is the ultimate rebellion. It is a rebellion against the fear of failure, against the forces that keep us stuck, and against the narratives that limit our potential. It is a rebellion that begins within you and ripples out into the world, inspiring others to do the same. So take a moment to feel the weight of this truth. Let it sink into your bones, your heart, your soul. Let it redefine how you see yourself, your life, and your potential. And then take the leap, because the fear of failure is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one, and that story is yours to write. Now go. Fail boldly, rise courageously, and live fully. The world is waiting for you.